Hey, how you guys doing? It's Producer from Brothers Comics. Welcome to the Who Dey Over 40 podcast for long time, long suffering Cincinnati Bengals fans. Who Dey, everybody. We are back. Hutch isn't with me tonight, but we are getting closer and closer to kickoff for the 24-25 season for the Cincinnati Bengals. I am fresh out of Cincinnati just a little over a week ago for the Jungle Jam presented by Bengal Gyms and Friends. It was a great time. If you follow me on any of my social medias, on Twitter at Who Dey Over 40, Facebook, same thing. You'll see a lot of the pictures from there. Got a couple of pictures with some legends like Jeff Blake, Pete Johnson, Trent Irwin. Got a picture with him. It was a really good time and a great cause and all of that for Bengals and Bengals fans. So yeah, just a big old Who Dey for that whole event. So tonight we're going to go over, like I said, 42 days until kickoff. So we'll do like we have been doing. We'll look at the 40 or the players that wore those particular numbers beforehand, all the way down from where we last picked off from, I think, 57 all the way down to 42. And then we will go look at training camp. Training camp opening up tonight is the Bengals get together. They are literally probably walking right out onto the field for the fourth practice for training camp. So we'll talk about a little bit about the news over this particular week. Honestly, there's only a couple of things that are really noteworthy, the most of which is being Joe Burrow is healthy. All the noise about his hair and all of that other stuff is really just background noise. He's healthy, he's throwing, and we'll get to that when we get to the end. But that's it. All right, so let's jump into these numbers real quick because we got a lot of them to go through. Here we go. So starting off, y'all, number 57. This is a real tough one because if you're an old-time Bengals fan, 57 is the number that was worn by Reggie Williams. He's essentially the mayor of Cincinnati back in his day on both Super Bowl teams. A pretty solid linebacker for the Bengals, throughout the 80s. Good dude all around. He's had some health issues here at the latter parts of his career or his life or whatever. But just an overall dude, I definitely think he's going to wind up in the Ring of Honor at some point in time. But yeah, that's for old school fans. New school fans, it's got to be Jermaine Pratt. Again, my, we are creatures of the moment, and so how do you take Reggie Williams over Pratt when he has the interception that seals, not winning a playoff game for 31 years and all of that? He had a pretty average to bad season this past season for the Bengals. Him and Logan Wilson both. So if you have that in your head, you're like, hey, you know what, I'm going with Reggie Williams, but it's got to be Jermaine Pratt. Hopefully that he bounces back this year because you really can't overlook what he did helping win that playoff game and, the play that he had even the following season. But yeah, this past season, he was definitely not the player that he was the previous two. So hopefully he has a nice bounce back for the Bengals in 24-25. All right. Number 56. This is enough said, y'all. It's Brian Simmons. Linebacker, played for the Bengals. He was teamed up with TKO Spikes for many of those years. Brian Simmons was a hell of a linebacker for the Bengals. I think he's now an executive with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he obviously stayed, as a football lifer, but a very good player. Never really, I don't think, reached that full potential, but he was always kind of like an underneath type of Pro Bowl player. And, teamed up with TKO Spikes, which we'll get to when we get to 51. Was just a really solid linebacker for the Bengals. Played on some not great teams, obviously, but a really solid player for the Bengals. Completely enough said. 55 is also enough said. It's a hard one though, y'all. It's Vontaze Burfict. Let's give a shout out to Logan Wilson though. He's going to wind up having, if he doesn't already have, the interception record for linebackers for the Bengals. Also had a great season. I've said this on numerous occasions. I know they would have never given it to him, but he probably was the MVP of that Super Bowl. It would have gone to T. Higgins, but he played a hell of a game in that Super Bowl. Last season, not great. Him and Jermaine Pratt both struggled mightily last year, but the two previous seasons, Logan Wilson is a very solid linebacker for the Bengals as a third-round pick. But it has to be Tez, right? Like, I mean, are we really arguing against that? Undrafted free agent comes in literally off the street, ends up getting his first start based off an injury, and then he just never left. When his head was on right, one of the best linebackers in the league, not just for the Bengals. But unfortunately, the reason that he was an undrafted free agent is because sometimes he didn't get his head on right. And a lot of this you could put on Marvin, because Marvin kind of let him do what he wanted to do. And, all the suspensions, and he'd come back from suspension and he'd be out of shape and he'd have to work himself back into shape. Like, it was just all of these things. And that's why you can kind of give a shout out to Logan Wilson. If somebody took Logan Wilson over Tez, that's fine. Freaking Tez has possibly the two biggest moments in Bengals recent history, separated by like 3 minutes. Like, essentially, he has this huge interception in that playoff game against the Steelers, and Jeremy Hill fucks it up for everybody. But then he goes out and makes that ridiculous hit, unnecessary, on Antonio Brown and lays him out. Probably led to Antonio Brown's CTE issues that later on, which we'll find out when he dies. But that penalty didn't help anything. And then everything that happens with him and Pac-Man afterwards. And then, the Steelers wind up stealing that game just on the Bengals, absolutely melting at the end. It's if you're remembering Jermaine Pratt for that interception and picking him over Reggie Williams, then maybe you remember this terrible moment for Tez and you take Logan Wilson. And I wouldn't argue with you one way or the other. But yeah, I think it's enough said as Tez, but golly, those last moments for the Bengals did not help things at all. 54, y'all. It's going to be enough said because it's Bob Johnson. He's the first draft pick ever for the Cincinnati Bengals. That's the only number that's officially retired by the Cincinnati Bengals, which is the number 54. I had no idea that was the case until we started doing this, Hutch and I. But yes, Bob Johnson, first pick. I couldn't tell you anything about him other than that he played center. And that's about it. I'm a long-time Bengals fan, but I ain't that long-term. I'm old, but I ain't that old. So, yeah, Bob Johnson, 54, only retired number. That's got to be enough said. And trust me, there were no other players that could have gotten that either. 53, they're all trash, y'all. There was no good 53s. I usually put the roster up here so you can see that they're trash, but I'm not putting them up just because I can put Billy Price's picture up there because he was absolute trash. The Bengals got forced into a situation where they needed to draft a center. If you go back into the archives of our podcast, you'll see me going off about the Bengals, primarily Marvin's inability to draft a center or really offensive line for the most part, and it's constantly recycling just terrible dudes. Well, Billy Price gets overdrafted because, he had not really any position versatility coming out of Ohio State. Then he gets injured during the combine. Then he comes in injured. Then they have to play him at guard. It was just a bad run of things. And then, once he did get a chance to get healthy and to play, he sucked. Basically, I don't know if that was just because of the injury. I know he's had some medical concerns later on in his life. We wound up trading him to the Giants for BJ Hill, which we well won that version of that particular trade. And I know he just retired recently, due to some medical concerns. If you know me well enough, I've seen his stuff. He's a huge trumper too, so he can fuck off for that as well. But beyond all of that, it's just looking at him as a football player in the NFL. 100% garbage, trash with all the other 53s. And that's it. Enough said. Let's go to 52, y'all. Oh, the roster is out, and the trash can is back up. Let's look at these number 52s. Man, they're all bad. There's really nothing good for 52. They just all go into the garbage can as well. It's really tough when you get into these numbers because, we're talking primarily offensive linemen. And again, the Bengals have had some good offensive linemen. 52 is probably going to be a center or a guard at that particular time. Centers and guards, they've done well, but man, over time, they just haven't really been that good. 52, all trash, all garbage. Enough said. All right, 51. In the countdown to kickoff, y'all, the best Bengal player to wear 51 is TKO Spikes. That's enough said. We're going to give a shout out to Odell Thurman for that one season with the Bengals because he was an absolute beast for that one season. I mean, the interceptions, the sacks, the intensity, like Odell was a great player and was destined to be a great player if he could have put the bottle down. If you go back and look at that draft for the Bengals, the first two picks, David Pollock broke his neck. He's out. Odell drank himself out of the league. Both from the University of Georgia, one a Christian, one not a Christian, and still both of them wind up out of the league. Chris Henry's the third round pick. He's dead. Like, I mean, the years that they should have gotten depth and won, it should have been built off of this particular draft, and it just didn't go. But back to TKO, he was a great player for the Bengals. I put this picture up here. This is the first game of the season when they beat the Patriots. I want to say this is 1996. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I mean, he was hyped up for this particular moment. He was a great player for us. He winds up, not making any Pro Bowls or anything like that, but then going to Buffalo and making, several Pro Bowls, as a Buffalo Bill. He just wanted out. When Marvin got hired, he was just done. Like, he was just couldn't deal with the losing anymore. And it's really kind of like a defensive Corey Dillon situation. When Corey Dillon, when Marvin got there too, he was just like fed up. He just couldn't, he was fed up with the losing. And you don't blame TKO for being that way at all. And again, he goes on to have some very productive seasons with the Bills, and played a couple of years with I think the Chargers as well. A very good player for the Bengals and for some other teams. But yeah, it's definitely TKO. But shout out to Odell, man. I hope he got his life together. Number 50. It's got to be down to either Dave Remington or James Francis, as the only two. Hutch, I wish he was on here right now because he loved James Francis as a player coming out of Colorado. And he had a couple of decent seasons as defensive end for the Bengals, or defensive end / linebacker, a couple of, 8-9 sack seasons. He was just on a bunch of bad teams in the 90s, and there was really nothing that he could do about that, but he at least tried. Dave Remington, great center, a center for one of the Super Bowl teams, if not both of them. A very solid player. I'd probably go with Remington myself if we were picking somebody between the two of them, because, he played on championship teams. And, James Francis didn't. He might have gotten his sacks, and he might have gotten, and he was also somebody that just wanted his money as well. And he did get those things, but he didn't bring any winning or anything like that to the Bengals. And again, I always give an asterisk to some of these dudes that were drafted in the 90s, because the whole organization was dysfunctional, and then you drafted sometimes dysfunctional dudes in a dysfunctional situation, and they didn't perform to expectation. And you blame the player for that, because ultimately it is their responsibility to come out and be professionals, but they were also playing for an unprofessional organization. So I blame them, but I don't. All right, let's get to 49, y'all. Trash. Let's go. Joe Bacci might be the best player on here, and that's saying a lot. Okay, that's saying a lot. So we're going to go ahead and move past 49 because it's all trash. On to 48. Brad St. Louis. I think it has to be Brad St. Louis, right? Like, he was the holder or the long snapper for a long time for the Bengals. He's going to turn over to Clark Harris here, which we're going to come up on in a second. But, like, I mean, he was there for a bit, as a special team stalwart for the Bengals. These positions are very important. And then when we get to Clark Harris, I'm going to talk about one of the most unfortunate and crazy situations of all time in Bengals history for 2 years ago. But I think it's definitely, Brad St. Louis. Again, solid player, solid long snapper, a position that you can play for a very long time in the league, because it's really not that much wear and tear. And it's a skilled position, because long snapping on field goals is a huge thing. Long snapping on punts, that's a very huge thing. Not everybody can do it. So, yeah, Brad St. Louis at 48. Oh, moving on to 47, y'all. Let's see. It's all garbage. It's all garbage. If you got Paul Dawson, another one of those Marvin, I'm gonna fixing linebackers. Didn't work out. Marvin White, awful freaking safety. Chris Worley, another awful one. Just bad. It's all trash. Just dump it. 47. God almighty. Hope nobody has it right now. All right. Best wear number 46. All right, it is between two people, y'all. It's Clark Harris or Pete Johnson. Now, I got a chance to see and meet and get a picture with Pete Johnson here this past week. A long-suffering Cincinnati Bengal fans remember that goal line stand against the freaking 49ers in 1981. You'll never forget it. It's embedded in your mind forever. The Bengals can't get a yard. Pete Johnson, they big back. Also a Buckeye, just could not get that in there. And again, it ain't really on him. It's on the offensive line to get through. He just couldn't do it, and that really set up the downfall of the Bengals losing that Super Bowl to the 49ers in 81. That's a painful memory, actually, looking at the picture. Clark Harris, again, long snapper for the Bengals for many, many years. and you're like, oh man, it's just the long snapper. Go back to the opening game 2 years ago in Cincinnati versus the Steelers, where Clark Harris gets hurt, and then they just have some random person snapping the ball. That combination between long snapper, holder, and kicker is very important. And Evan McPherson, one of the best, who's probably going to get a contract extension here within the next couple of days, couldn't get that figured out because the snaps were all off. So long snapper is a very important situation. Clark Harris, doesn't play ever again after that moment, that he gets injured in that game against the Steelers. That was it, and you have a new long snapper at this point in time. But yeah, that's it, y'all. Damn, Cal Idemitis, we hope you don't get hurt anytime soon. 45, oh boy. A little bit of trash, yes. Rogers, Beckett, oh, good Lord. Archie Griffin, man, we love the two-time Heisman winner, but as a Bengal, pure trash, just absolute awfulness. We're just going to keep it moving. 44, y'all. All trash again. I mean, look at these guys. I don't even know any. Darius Hodge. What? Who? Aaron Manning? Is that broke ass Peyton? Who are these people? Tony Dye. Come on, bro. 45, 44. Also straight trash. Let's keep it moving. 43. All right, it's got to be George Iocca. That's enough said, actually. George Iocca had a couple of good seasons for the Bengals, winds up becoming the starting safety. He was out of Boise State. I think he was a 5th-round pick. He wound up being, the starting safety for the Bengals there for a few years. He winds up leaving after, his contract is up. I think he signed with the Vikings, and he had a cup of coffee there and like a cup of coffee with the Cowboys after that, and then he's out of the league. But he was an okay player, a 5th-round hit for the Bengals, under Marvin. There weren't a lot of decent players or good players or, he found a gem like in a round after round 4 under Marvin Lewis in them 17 years, man. Like it was rounds 1 through 4 or bust, man. And, Iocca actually came in and had a couple of decent seasons for the Bengals. So he's definitely the best to wear 43. All right, and the last number for tonight is 42. This is a 3-way tie. It probably depends on kind of where you go here. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's got to either be Booby Clark, Chris Crocker, or Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. Like Booby Clark started out wearing 35, but he ended in 42. Shouts out to Clayton Pendulum or whatever, but it depends. Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, when he got here to the Bengals, he was kind of washed. He never fumbles, and he fumbled a couple times for the Bengals. Chris Crocker comes here and actually provided some decent safety play, for the Bengals on some AFC North winning teams. I'd probably lean towards Chris Crocker, because he did have a couple of good seasons here with the Bengals. Ben Jarvis, he was just, man, I was watching back some of those games not that much long ago. He was so slow. I mean, again, he might have been steady and, hits the hole, gets the yards that he's supposed to, but he was never going to break one. He wasn't going to make anybody miss. It was just 2 yards in a cloud of dust, man, with Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. And again, I'm old, man. Booby Clark old, y'all. Sorry. Peace. All right. Let's get to this Bengals training camp because this is really what people care about. Look, there's been some storylines that have come out in these first 3 days of practice. Like I said, they are at the Back Together event tonight. Again, I know like the headline's been, Joe Burrow's hair and all of that, but those really aren't it. So I have it a couple of things here. So one, Joe Burrow's back. He's been cleared for practice. He's on a, 2 days on, 1 day off as the Bengals go 3 days. He's 2-1 off. So he's practiced the first 2 days. He threw the ball all over the field. I know people are concerned about that. During the OTAs, he was, kind of softballing things, but he pushed the ball down the field. Ball had some snap on it. If you listen to the players, of course, they're not going to say that it doesn't, but outside observers said the ball looks good. He's still working on ball rotation, placement, those types of things as he's getting used to throwing. But, he's looked pretty good. I don't think, knock on wood, that there's any real issues or concerns right now as he's just working his way through this whole thing. All right. Other news. Coach Zach Taylor said the starters are going to play in the preseason. We'll see how much they play and when they play, but he did say that they're going to do that. We've got on the Bengals a lot here on this particular podcast about club fed or for the preseason where the players aren't playing. And, and we've gotten these 0-2 starts the last couple of seasons because, it seems like they need to play themselves into it. And so now they're actually going to go out and play some snaps, 2, 3, a drive, a half. I have no idea how much they're going to play, but I think it is probably for the best a little bit. Now, again, this all it comes down to is does anybody get injured? If anybody gets injured, then everybody's going to get fired. If it's anybody important that gets injured in this thing. But I think going out and playing like a drive in like week one of the preseasons against Tampa, or maybe playing 2 drives after that, like in the other game, like that's fine. You already have these joint practices with those teams as well. So that's kind of live bullets too. So I think that should be enough. But yeah, man, you really got to, these guys got to get out there and play. And I'm glad they're moving off not playing the starters at all. All right, and we'll come back to Jamar Chase in a second. Amarius Mims is now getting reps with the first team as the starting right tackle, as Trent Brown is on the NFI list, the non-football injury list with soreness, air quotations. So that's going on. So, first round pick out there. Let's see if he winds up giving up that job. I don't think they want him to start, but he's getting the reps as the starter right now. We'll see how it goes and how long Trent Brown is out. Tight end Eric All was cleared today off the PUP list. He was able to go out to practice. I'm not sure if he's at practice today as we speak, but he definitely adds a different dynamic to the tight end room as somebody that can block and catch and run routes. Coming out of Iowa tight ends, tend to be pretty good. He started at that school up north, but we won't hold that against him if he's actually any good. But yeah, that's a big move for the Bengals today and a big move for him, coming off that ACL tear at Iowa. And then, all right, the Jamar Chase thing. This is where I'm glad Hutch isn't on, but I kind of wish that he was, just because I know he would give you people some good content to be yelling at him about, or I would be yelling at him. Like, so Jamar Chase comes to camp, reports on time. He's healthy. There's no issues there, but he hasn't practiced in any of the days. And then, I don't know if Goat Killer's producing this so he can hear me, that if he's practicing today at the all-in thing at the stadium. I'm assuming that he's not, but I'll be happy if I'm wrong. He's doing a hold in. He's not holding out like CD Lamb, some other players across the NFL, that they want their contracts, they want their money, and they're just not showing up. Jordan Love did the same thing. Then he got paid. Tua was doing the same thing on a hold in, and then Tua got paid. The Bengals at their, mock turtle soup press conference, said, Mike Brown said, we're going to bend over backwards to get that deal done. Whether it happens now or whether it happens next year, I mean, they're going to get done. Like everybody was kind of, waiting for, Jetta to get his deal, and he got it. So the parameters are set. I think everybody knows that. But Jamar's only going into his 4th season. They have him under contract. The 5th-year option is also there. The Bengals are going to do this contract when they're ready to do it. It's not like it's not going to get done. So all the hand wringing, all the national media people, Adam Schefter, like all those people, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're just creating content. And, and as a social media person myself, you don't have to click that shit, and nor do you have to engage in it with Adam Schefter or people retweeting it that are fans of other teams. You just don't. Like if you follow local Bengals coverage, whether it be the Locked On dudes, PB and the Growler, like all of that, those dudes know exactly what's going on with the team in Cincinnati. And at no point in time is anybody reporting from Cincinnati that covers the team every day that there's any issue between the Bengals and Jamar Chase. He's at practice. He's happy. He's getting Gatorade. He's giving people towels. He's, coaching up, some of the young wide receivers. He's hyping people up during practice. There's nothing wrong. But I also don't blame him either. Like, I'm not going to go out here and potentially hurt myself and lose all of this money. Of course he's going to play. He's going to play on that. Him and Joe Burrow don't need any more time together, for God's sake. They know exactly what's going on and the routes that they need to run and where to put the ball. Like all of that's nothing. It's a nothing burger. And I hate that expression. But there is nothing happening here. There's nothing going on. There's nothing wrong with the Bengals or anything like that. So, boo. Other than that, some other big ups, man. I think Andre Oshivas is having a really good camp. Yoshi's been playing in the slot, and they've been moving him all over. Obviously, with Chase being out, there's some, ability to, some extra snaps going on there. So that's a good thing for Yoshi. Chase Brown looks really good, looks fast. We obviously figured that out from last season. So that looks like to be interesting to see if he's going to start or not. Defense is really hard to tell, because they don't have pads on yet. And this practice tonight isn't pads. They're not bringing the pads out until next week. So it's really hard to tell how well the defense is doing or anything like that. So it's camp, y'all. Right now they're running around in shorts, and helmets. When the pads come on, that's when you'll know. And then we got a preseason game next week, like the first preseason game against Tampa at Paycor. Like that's exciting. Football is back, and we'll get a chance to see these guys play for some extended time. The Bengals have a really deep roster, y'all. They really do, especially at tight end, wide receiver. I mean, there's a lot of dudes there. There'll even be some opportunities for people, at defensive back as well. They're going to be playing and trying to get on tape for some other teams because there's just not going to be enough space for on the Bengals roster for them, or even to carry them all on the practice squad. So there should be some deep competition there and some good players. They're going to get cut. Hopefully nobody gets hurt. That's really the only thing that you can hope for, is that no legitimate player that you plan on playing serious minutes in the season gets hurt. All right. So that's it, y'all. Like, I am out, man. I got this done in under a half hour, in and out. Got my red shirt on. I'm going to go see the Reds play the Marlins here in a few days. Excited about that. We will see everybody on the other side of the other side, y'all. Who Dey? Peace.